welcome to another episode of the Reverse Mentor Lab,
where we engage with thinkers from around the world to explore how leaders of today can learn from leaders of tomorrow.
You're back with your hosts. I'm Joshua.
And I'm Jens. Today we're chatting to Brian Kilkelly about the growing urgency to tackle sustainability questions and the role the younger generation will play. Brian is an expert on climate change and has worked for the EU Commission for Climate Change over the last 5 years and recently co-founded Climate Business, which offers a peer-to-peer mentoring network for organizations to tackle climate change questions.
Hello, Brian. Welcome to another episode of the Reverse Mentor Lab. It's great to have you with us today.
Thanks, Josh. Good to be with you too. Thanks for the invitation. And good to see you again.
Good morning, and congratulations for beating the Germans yesterday in the European Championship. That's dating the podcast recording a little bit.
It is indeed, and I'm maybe a little bit more red-eyed than normally because of it. But yeah, quite a celebration. It's very rare we get to overcome the fantastic German team. So commiserations to the German team as well.
Once every 50 years.
That's right.
At least in official tournaments.
True.
Yeah, well, it's great. I'm the South African on the call today, and sitting here with two Europeans, it's great to see how seriously the European Cup is taken, and also the pride that comes out inside of that, but also the celebration, because I think the last 15, 16 months have been trying and challenging for a lot of people. And to have that little bit of normalcy return and excitement around football is awesome. So yeah, it's awesome to see that Europe's coming alive and embracing the European Championships at the moment. But maybe, Brian, to kick things off from a conversation perspective, let's hear a bit about you. Who's Brian, and what are some of your passions? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, so I live in the south of England, about an hour south of London. I'm very passionate about the environment, about nature, about the natural world. I live in a really beautiful part of the world, so I get to enjoy lots of walks and running and being outside with my family and friends. I'm also very passionate about the power of business to bring about positive change. I see great opportunity through markets to bring about better living, better lifestyles, better quality of life for people. So my kind of career in life has been very much about bringing those two worlds together of I guess, really passionate about people, places, and the role of business to improve lives.
Yeah, that's an awesome way to kick things off, Brian. And the two things that I just want to dive a bit deeper on. So you mentioned about people and places. And it's fascinating to think about how that links in today's topic of sustainability and sort of the urgency to tackle some of the challenges from a sustainability standpoint that we're facing. How have you sort of seen places and people evolve over the last couple of years with obviously with a lens of sustainability in mind?
So I've seen a lot of really exciting change. So in the past 5 years, I've had the privilege of working for the European Commission on climate innovation. So I've been working with partners across Europe and across the world, in fact, on ideas around how do we tackle climate change by bringing business, academia, civil society, governments together around innovation ideas. And how can you kind of create collectives that can move things forward together. So I'm very excited to see that, there are lots of fantastic ideas out there, lots of great change happening, and there is great potential. But also, I'm kind of shocked and horrified at the damage that we're doing to the planet. And I'm sure I'm not alone. Many on this call as well are very concerned about, the kind of breakdown of biodiversity of the natural world, the loss of habitats, the loss of species, and even in the UK and Europe, we see much more severe weather. It's now almost July, and it's been raining crazily here in the UK for the last few weeks. Floods in my local town here, and we're just seeing much more of this kind of volatile weather coming in, and just disruption around the world. So fires in California and Australia, of course, and I know there's been huge drought challenges on your continent, Joshua, in Africa. So, I kind of live in this kind of world of like, great hope and great inspiration around the innovation ideas, but also the reality that, we're not in a good place. And actually, carbon emissions are continuing to rise, despite, countless pledges over the last 2 or 3 decades, really, where governments and business together have pledged to kind of make a change. But, we're really struggling to kind of turn that corner in terms of bringing emissions down at a rate that we need to do.
Yeah, just double clicking on that. So there, translating that into my plain German English, it's like you're literally saying there's a lot of talking, but not enough, at least doing. What do you think are the root causes of that's not going as fast, or not going into acting specifically from a broader perspective? There are most probably, or there are at least what I know, a lot of companies and a lot of individuals who do very, very good things, but it's not that the broad spectrum of an industry is moving on the same space. So what are your views on that?
Yeah, good question, Jens. So I think change is difficult. Of course, none of us like change, and climate change is one of those wicked problems where, unlike the pandemic we're going through, where it was an immediate impact, the climate crisis is relatively slow, almost imperceptible change. And despite the scientists telling us that every year it's hotter than the previous year, and despite the fact that we see disasters around the world, still in our immediate surroundings, for most of us, we don't see the impact. So that's one thing. That's a challenge for us. And I think also we struggle to kind of paint the picture of what that change is going to achieve for us. So, how is life going to be better if I do this and this? So that's one thing. And the second thing is the change that we're looking to make happen. It's no longer sufficient for that change to be incremental change. So small improvements to how we do things are not going to get us there because of the scale of change we need to make. So we need to look at how we change whole systems. And systemic change is really challenging. So an example which I've done a lot of work on, a lot of experience on, is, for example, around construction and property development and the change to a more circular system of development. So at the moment, we exist in a linear system where we build a house as cheaply as possible and sell it for the highest price. And actually, the waste that's produced along the journey is really irrelevant. It's a very small proportion of the cost of the house, so we don't worry about the waste. So here in the UK, it's shocking, but actually 2/3 of the waste that we produce in the UK comes from construction work.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. Now, the solution to that exists. The solution is what we call the circular economy or circularity. And it's where we actually treat that waste as a resource and we reuse the waste, or we reduce the waste, eliminate waste, reduce waste, reuse the waste, repurpose the waste. And that requires a systemic change to how we think about how we build a house. So it means, rather than building it cheaply as possible, we actually build it in a way that it can be, there's a minimum amount of waste, and any waste that is produced can be reused in the process. But actually, even going further than that, if we think about the issue of how carbon is embodied in buildings, we need to also be able to repurpose those buildings and reuse those buildings, and actually disassemble those buildings down to their kind of core components and rebuild them somewhere else or in a different way. It's almost like building out of Lego bricks that can be taken apart, rather than kind of gluing it all together and then it can never be used again. So that requires a very much a change to the process and a whole change to the supply chain involved in that process. So lots of actors need to move together in unison and to be incentivized to move together. So that's one of our, I think that's one of our wicked problems, is we need to find ways to really inspire people and to incentivize them and to encourage them to see that actually there's a massive business opportunity here for those that can move into this systemic change. But there's no doubt about it, we are going to have to make this happen. The change is coming. And it's really about recognizing that you can get first mover advantage by being ahead of those changes.
I would like to go a little bit deeper on the systemic change. So what we have seen in the pandemic situation, that if the global world population is seeing this is threatened by something, they get things done. I mean, we have been enormous successful in building out vaccines over the last year, which was the fastest development ever in the medical environment from a broad perspective. Is there something like that needed, that people are starting to act on climate change? Because I agree with you, it's a huge business opportunity, and I would love to dig more into that after we have tackled this one. But what is your perspective? Do we need to have a bigger threat that we all stick together and work towards one direction, or what is missing?
Yeah, it's a complex business. I would say for sure we need people to kind of start paying attention to the fact that, you know, the scale of change is required. So, you know, we need all elements of society to act. So we need governments to be braver, to set, you know, really, you know, tougher regulations and policies. We've had the pledges. I think actually, I really don't want to hear any more pledges. You know, and in fact, you know, the pledges are not working because governments are not necessarily following through with some of the kind of policy implementation. So, you know, here in the UK, for example, about 5 years ago, we were really close to implementing zero carbon homes, you know, new build homes. And the government just at the last minute, even though industry was kind of ready for it, decided, oh no, let's just leave it as it is for a bit longer and see how, you know, the existing process works, which is really disappointing. They weren't more ambitious. But saying that, we have seen the UK government and other European governments say we are going to phase out fossil fuel vehicles by 2030, 2035, 2040. And that's really sent a really strong signal to the car industry. And you can really see the effect of that. And so, you know, governments need to be more ambitious. I think business is beginning to mobilize, but I think business still sees it a little bit too much as compliance and risk reduction rather than opportunity. So I think a shift in business perception of saying, actually, this is going to happen. Let's get behind this. Let's get ahead of this. Let's start adapting, because it also takes a while to adapt. And then consumers, you know, people like us, you know, we need to continue to make choices on what we buy based on the long-term future that we want. And we need to become more activist locally with our local municipal governments, councils, and communities, and make more noise. And I just say that, you know, what I'm very hopeful about is actually the old saying, which is follow the money. Yeah, and the money is really shifting into the direction of the kind of the climate change direction. So there's a massive rise in what we call ESG investment. So environment, social, governance, kind of related investment classes. So this is where pension funds are responding to really the legal challenge that it's their duty as pension funds to make sure that the money is not at risk. And because it's very clear now from the science that climate change is introducing huge risks to investments, pension funds are now mobilizing and saying, right, we're going to move money out of things which are at climate risk. And also they're being forced to do that by us, because we are now looking at our pension funds, many of us, and saying, I no longer want my fund to be active in that area. I'm moving all my money out of fossil fuels and I'm moving it now into renewables, for example. And many people are making that choice, which is just fantastic. So, so money is moving at a massive rate in this direction. And you know what I'm seeing and hearing is that a lot of companies, a lot of corporates are now being grilled by their investors to say, what are you doing about, you know, your sustainable strategy? And they're coming back from these kind of you know, investor meetings going, oh gosh, you know, we really need to start, you know, moving into a zero carbon direction much faster. So money is speaking very loudly.
Yeah, number of great points there, Brian. And I'm just going to pull a few threads together, and then the next question that I ask and use it as a bit of a segue to start talking about what can the younger generation do to start sort of influencing or supporting that change from an overall perspective. So you spoke about circularity, you spoke about ambition, and you also spoke about systemic change. But, you know, from a younger generation, the influence that we might have, how can we influence systemic change? Can we rather, you know, create small incremental changes at a lower level, which may influence and create platforms for systemic change? And then sort of in that thinking is, how can younger generations inside businesses, but also inside policy frameworks, help influence that systemic change that is needed?
Yeah. So I think younger generations can have a huge influence in terms of signaling to business, you know, how consumer demand is shifting. So, of course, you know, the choices we make about how we buy things is already having an effect. I would encourage the younger generation to get more activist. And, you know, as well as getting out there on the marches, which many millions are doing, which is fantastic. But also, you know, when you're in a shop, or when you're talking to business people, you know, your parents, you know, your friends, you know, ask them what they're doing. You know, literally, you know, challenge them. You know, when you're buying something at the till, you know, you might want to ask, you know, why are you still using, you know, these materials, or, you know, why is this shop door being left open and the air conditioning on or the heating on? You know, and I think the more we can kind of challenge people and ask people, you know, ask to speak to the manager and say, look, I just noticed you've left your door open all day, you know, every day, and the central, you know, the heating's on or the air conditioning's on. You know, there's a climate crisis. What are you doing? You know, why would I shop here if you're not actually caring about the planet? You know, those things actually can have quite a big effect, because the combination of that, you know, consumers kind of saying, look, you know, this is no longer acceptable, and their investors saying, what are you doing about this? And then government regulation beginning to tighten up. You know, they're all pointing towards, okay, I need to pay your attention to this. So I think, you know, there's a lot we can do at signaling, and I'd say, you know, there's an interesting psychology around almost, I think a lot of business leaders and a lot of city leaders kind of know what they need to be doing. They almost need the permission from us as citizens and as consumers to go ahead and do it. And so if we're saying to our city leaders and our business leaders, we want this, then it's easier for them to step up at the board meeting and say, look, we really need to be doing this. We need to be listening to our customers. We need to be listening to our citizens. And it almost gives them the confidence to take the tough decisions, to start making these kind of shifts and these adaptations.
I love that perspective, because you're mentioning a module. What I often use is, you need to work with push and pull. It's like one side you need to increase the pressure, which is happening. The other side you need to bring opportunities in, where in the best case customers are demanding you to do that, and then they will only buy the better version, and that's then creating the change. What is your view on a community-based approach, where there are a lot of challenges and there are a lot of experts out there? Do you believe they need to be working together? They need to be engaging with each other? What is your view on that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things that we worked very hard on at my previous organization, Climate Kick, when I was working with the European Union, was this idea of bringing together the different sectors around innovation projects. And, you know, if you think about systemic change, it does, by its nature, require you to look at a system from lots of different angles. And so the need for kind of working across silos is massive. So there's a huge need around creating new kind of spaces where people can kind of come together to understand different perspectives from a public sector point of view, private sector point of view, and civil society point of view. And this is one of our big challenges in our society, in that, you know, we've been very good at making things more efficient, and almost by making things more efficient, we've moved into silos. So very efficient silos around infrastructure, buildings, transport, commerce. And so the walls between these silos have risen up, which makes it quite difficult for us now to break through and make systemic changes. I'll give you an example. There's a great startup in Europe called Zedify, which have created a delivery service using cargo bikes. So it's solving that last kilometer challenge of how do we deliver parcels to homes in the last kilometer in businesses, zero carbon. And their solution is the bicycle. So they have a whole army of individuals who are paid a living wage, by the way, who are cycling around on cargo bikes delivering parcels. And it's great because it means that you can really reduce carbon in the whole logistics process massively. The problem is that the systems around logistics are so well tied down with contracts and long-term commitments and big clients and different layers that it's really hard for Zedify to kind of build their business at scale. So there you need a city and corporates to come together to say, we're going to find ways to break through the procurement challenges and to create a space for companies like Zedify to grow and prosper and to compete against the incumbent supply chain. And so, Zedify, it'd be very hard for a small company like that to break through that by itself. I mean, it is profitable, it is growing, it is making some success, but it needs a conversation at a community level, at a place level, to say, actually, in this city, we really want to see Zedify or a solution like that to be part of the solution. We need to intervene as a city and as a business community to make it easier for them to succeed.
So on that point, Brian, it's a fascinating example that you've just raised, and I sort of want to go one step further and talk about the overall development of a community, not just from a business enablement perspective, but from learning from one another. So to sort of break down and challenge some of those silos that have maybe been created from this drive towards efficiency. And in doing that, I know that you and the team and your fellow founders at Climate Business have developed something from a peer-to-peer nature. And maybe you can just tell us a bit about that and say what your thinking behind that is and how you would go about that.
Yeah. So the challenge that we see is this, going back to this problem where there's a combination of many businesses are not aware of the scale of the change that's happening. And if they are aware, it's kind of too difficult to handle. It's complicated, it's complex. It's a world which they're not familiar with. They're familiar with incremental change rather than this kind of big change that's being asked for. So there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of lack of awareness. And also, there's a sense that actually each individual business is different. So not one size fits all. And so I think that presents a challenge. We believe at Climate Business that the solution to that challenge is actually to empower leaders by bringing them together, providing them information and a space where they can actually learn from each other and encourage each other on this journey. So this, what we recognize at our work at the European Union was a sense that actually if business leaders come together around projects for a period of time and build trust and openness, they can really start to break through some of these challenges. And so we're creating an environment to replicate that sense of being on a journey together by creating a peer-to-peer mentoring service, which invites business leaders into a space where they can receive information to help really inspire them about the potential for business change and business opportunity, but also structure it in such a way that they can learn from each other. And really, it's about really taking ownership of the challenge and the opportunity for their business and their situation, because they're all unique situations. And it's about really providing some tools and some ideas and some frameworks to help them work through this shift. In a way, it's a kind of a mental shift we see. It's like a mind shift. And it's kind of stepping back from the business and saying, okay, so this business model that we have that's successful now, this value proposition that we have, may not necessarily be successful or may need to be adapted in a zero carbon environment. What does that look like? What could that look like? And it's kind of looking ahead to the future of a world which is zero carbon, where carbon is incredibly expensive. And actually you need to take carbon out of your supply chain, out of your way of working. And you need to have a business which is restoring the planet, not damaging the planet. Imagine that future and then kind of track backwards from that to where you are today and start thinking through what are the changes I need to make to get my business into a situation where it is completely compatible with this new zero carbon world we're moving into. And by doing that together with peers, we believe there's a lot more chance of breaking through some of those changes, by providing a kind of a supportive environment for them to work through.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really a powerful thing when you have peers, like you say, supporting each other and lifting each other up on an ongoing basis and really learning from each other. And if that's a trusted environment, which I guess it will be over time, then you will also talk about the challenges, what is not working between the peers. And that's then helping as well challenges to unleash in your organization, which you can then lift up for other organizations in the same way, because we know a lot of companies struggle with the same things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, going back to a little bit of that permission to be brave, I think in those kind of peer environments, you can kind of hold each other to account and encourage each other to kind of really go out and adapt and to experiment. It's tough leading a business. If you're the CEO, you're on the board of a business, it can be a bit of a lonely place. You're carrying the can for the future of your business. You want your business to be successful. You want to be able to pass on your business perhaps to the next generation. You want to lead your business to success. And these are very uncertain times. And we've seen how much, change can be really damaging for business. COVID-19 has been a real challenge for business. It's been a real shock. We weren't ready for that. And our message at Climate Business is, there's an even bigger change coming. It's happening right now, and that's the climate crisis. But the difference this time is that we know it's coming. And we also know how to adapt. We do know a lot of what we need to be moving to. I wouldn't say we knew the answers for every single business, and nobody can, because every business is unique and has different customers and different scenarios. But we certainly know a lot about the kind of changes that need to start to be experimented, tried, and we know about the way a business can prepare itself well for that change, so that it actually is one of the leaders in this change and doesn't get left behind.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very nice way of saying it. Because we love to work against something we understand and we have seen. So if there are a couple of leaders, world leaders in a specific topic in a specific industry, then there will be automatically a lot of followers who are following their pathway. It's really about how do you lift up more leaders and more topics that there will be more followers going into that direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the things we're really focusing on Climate Business is to approach this from a business opportunity. So, we're passionate about, climate change, tackling climate change, and, going back to what I said earlier on about, I love this planet, I love nature, I love the natural world. But actually saying to businesses, oh, you really should be doing this to protect the planet. I don't think really that's a message that cuts through for every individual. Yeah. Whereas if the message is, hey, there's a massive business opportunity here, there's a huge market shift going on, take advantage of it. And that's absolutely true, because there is a big business opportunity. And what I'm seeing is that major corporates are moving in this direction. There's no end of leading corporate companies that are saying we have a zero carbon mandate by 2030, 2040, because they see the opportunity, they see the need. But there are tens of thousands of large and medium and small sized enterprises that are not seeing that yet, and are potentially going to get left behind. And that's a shame for their business, but also if we don't get them to start shifting, we will never solve climate change. So yes, I think we know we're focusing on the climate, on the business opportunity of climate change, and kind of really helping businesses to think that through. And who wouldn't want a business that is going to be more resilient to this change? That's going to be developing products that people love, because they're green and sustainable and they're restoring the planet. They're going to be able to attract the most talented people. I mean, Josh, going back to what you said about the younger generation now, they want to work for companies that are purposeful, that are looking after the planet, that are thinking about the future in mind. Those are the kind of companies that are attracting the talent. So if your company is not able to demonstrate that it's in a business that's going in that direction, then you're going to also struggle to recruit the most talented people.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Brian. It's sort of something that you mentioned earlier around ambition. And I think, in order to unlock ambition, there's certain conditions that need to be sort of preceded to allow that to happen. And sort of what you're discussing there is one from a people perspective, but also from potentially a policy standpoint. And while sort of seemingly unrelated in terms of policy is, you've got big tech companies that are now under the scrutiny of the law in the United States of America, using policies that were written 20 years ago. And I think that that's also a big change, to go back to Jens's point of push and pulls, where government can play a role in terms of creating conditions where this opportunity can be accessed and ambition can be unlocked, both from a personal but also from a business perspective, because that ties back to sort of the way that you framed using business as a tool to really drive the change going forward, which is extremely exciting. And I think Climate Business is well positioned to help businesses and people to unlock sort of that. But sort of, Brian, you've been very generous with your time, and sort of as we sort of change gears and look to sort of draw the conversation to a close here, we're establishing sort of a bit of a challenge methodology in the Reverse Mentor Lab, where we ask our guests to sort of leave the listeners with a challenge that they would like them to pick up or to take on. So I'll hand it back to you and ask, what do you have in store for the listeners?
Yeah, great. Yeah, it's I think I'd go back to what I said earlier on about if you're doing business, if you're buying a product or you're working for a business, then really think about how you can kind of think about the kind of changes that you want to see happen in that business, and challenge the leaders of that business that you're working in or that you're trying to do business with to start thinking about these things. Ask them, what are they doing to get their business ready for this change that's happening. So I think I think we can all play a role in that. And I think what I'd love to hear from people is their ideas on how we can encourage businesses to make that change, and how we can challenge businesses. Because we all want to see our businesses change and adapt. We can all play a role in that, but we also need more ideas about how we can inspire businesses to change and how we can kind of encourage that change. So I'd love to hear from people who maybe have ideas about how we can do that, how we can break through to business leaders, how we can get their attention in a positive way, or perhaps even a provocative way. I'd also love to hear from people who maybe have seen businesses that are making this kind of change, that are coming up with new business models. They've gone, oh wow, that's really interesting. That's a really different way of doing things. I can really see how that's kind of leading us in the right direction. Because the more examples we can give other businesses of where this change is happening, the more they can see that they're not alone in this thinking, and that actually, it's happening. So, yeah, get in touch. I guess we can share my email afterwards, Josh and Jens, to listeners. Do send me an email. Have a look at our website. Get in touch with us. Let us know, and don't hold back on being activists in when you're dealing with businesses.
One thing you mentioned before we started recording, you have something ongoing where maybe that's interesting for the listeners as well to use an opportunity in joining some of the things you're doing. So what are the opportunities for a couple of listeners who are into this engaging with you?
Great. Yeah, thanks, Jens. Yeah, so we are starting next month from the 14th of July, our first series of peer mentoring programs. We call this Journey to Xero. So our first Journey to Xero program kicks off next month, and we'd love a few business leaders to come and join us in that program. We're in a process now of kind of co-creating and shaping that program to make sure it's absolutely fit for purpose. So it's a good time to join, to experience this kind of change process, and to be one of those kind of organizations that are going to be at the front of this change process. But also join with us to help us shape it as well. We'd love to kind of have businesses that can also recognize that this is going to be a good thing for everybody, because actually this can't be something just for a few businesses. This thing needs to really grow, because we need all businesses to change and to move together. So yeah, join our Journey to Xero program. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome, Brian. And sort of just to wrap up, you've spoken a lot about your personal background, your passion for sustainability, the experience that you've had, and you've also laid down some challenges, I think, both for the experienced thinkers, as we call them in this podcast, and the young thinkers, because I think, and what you just concluded with there is that we're all on this journey together. And I'll sort of definitely promote your journey to zero that you're creating, and the peer-to-peer nature that you're going about it, which I think is great, because it's showcasing that from an ownership perspective, we're really all involved in terms of making a difference. And the hope is that you'll be able to drive some systemic change with those conversations that you're inspiring and the how that you're creating behind them. So thanks again for your time. Really enjoyed today's conversation, and all the best with building our climate business going forward.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Joshua. Thanks, Jens. Really appreciate the time. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening and joining us on the journey that is the Reverse Mentor Lab. If anything fascinated you in the discussion that we had today, you're welcome to set up a 15-minute coffee chat with us. Our emails are in the show notes, and you can also connect with us on our website, thexyzplayground.com.